Welcome to the Deep Dive. We unpack sources, find surprising insights, and really try to equip you with essential knowledge. Today we're diving into the life of A.G. Gaston. An incredible figure, immense wealth, major contributions, but somehow often overlooked in the main historical narratives. Our source for this is a really insightful book review. It looks at Black Titan, A.G. Gaston's legacy. The review's by David T. Beito from the Independent Review, and it gives us a critical look at Arthur G. Gaston's life.
Exactly. And what's so compelling here, I think, is we're looking at more than just a successful businessman. This is someone who had to navigate, the really complex world of segregation-era America. He wasn't just building businesses. He was actually shaping the economy and the civil rights movement in his own way. So our mission today is really to bring that story out, understand his, let's say, unique approach to progress.
Okay, let's get into it. The review kicks off with a pretty striking claim. By the 1960s, Arthur G. Gaston, likely the richest black man in America, and the leading employer of black people in Alabama. That's huge considering the time and place.
It really is. Yeah. But then you connect that to the bigger picture, like the review does. And it points out his name just isn't there in three major surveys of black history. You've got Hines' The African-American Odyssey, Trotter's The African-American Experience, Franklin's From Slavery to Freedom. No Gaston. So that immediately makes you ask, why? Why the omission? What does that tell us about how history gets written?
Right, and the authors of Black Titan, Carol Jenkins, who's actually Gaston's niece, and Elizabeth Gardner Hines, his grandniece, they wanted to fix that. They show Gaston as part of this long, important tradition. Black business, self-help, mutual aid. For you, the listener, finding out about Gaston is like rediscovering a whole vital piece of American history that often just gets left out. So where did this Black Titan even come from? His beginnings were, tough. Poverty, born 1893, Demopolis, Alabama. His dad worked on the railroad, manual labor. His mom was a cook for a prominent white family.
Yeah, very humble beginnings. The family later moved to Birmingham, a booming city then, industrial, and his mother got work there for A.B. Loveman, a wealthy Jewish department store owner. And that connection turns out to be really important. Loveman became a sort of model for Gaston, how to prosper through hard work, careful investments, a real-life example.
And here's a really interesting detail. Loveman's wife, Minnie Loveman, she actually helped get Gaston into the Tuggle Institute. Now, this institute, it was founded by the Order of Calanthe. That was the women's auxiliary of the Colored Knights of Pythias, big fraternal group. And they followed Booker T. Washington's ideas, that whole industrial education focus, skills, self-reliance.
And Gaston completely bought into it, became a huge disciple of Washington. Apparently, the first book he owned was Washington's autobiography, Up from Slavery. And his favorite passage, the one that really shaped his thinking, talked about merit, no matter under what skin found, is in the long run recognized and rewarded. And also Washington's idea that black people needed to make themselves indispensable through skill, intelligence, character, so the community couldn't do without them. That wasn't just words for Gaston. It was like his life's blueprint.
Okay, so after World War I, things were still hard. He drove a delivery truck. He even worked as a coal miner for a time, which he apparently described as maybe the lowest point of his life. But even then, you see that spark, always looking for an angle, an opportunity.
Exactly. Always the entrepreneur. Even in the mines, he gets this idea. Sell boxed lunches. His mother made them. He sold them to the other miners. Simple, but it worked. It worked so well, he started selling popcorn and peanuts too. And the really fascinating part here, his discipline. He saved 2/3 of his income during that time. Just think about that. Saving that much while working as a miner. Incredible focus.
Wow. Yeah. And with that money he saved up, he pivots, he basically becomes the local banker, starts giving out loans to his coworkers at 25% interest, mind you. But it shows that spirit, right? Spotting a need, filling a gap in his community where maybe traditional banks weren't serving people.
Absolutely. And pretty soon he'd saved enough to quit mining altogether. That's when he starts the Booker T. Washington Burial Society, modeled it after those fraternal orders he knew, and it took off. A big reason was his smart alliances with black ministers. They'd sort of steer their congregations his way. He also sponsored gospel singers, got involved in Alabama's first regular Negro radio program. He understood marketing, community ties.
And he was really, as the review notes, a pioneer among black entrepreneurs in using vertical integration so aggressively. That means controlling the whole process, right? He starts with the burial insurance. Then he buys an undertaking business, a casket maker, even a cemetery. Total control over the whole dying business, basically.
Right.
Kept the profits in-house, ensured quality, offered them the whole package.
Yeah, the book makes that great comparison. As Carnegie was to steal, Gaston was to dying. And it really makes you wonder, how common was that level of strategic thinking, that kind of integration among black entrepreneurs back then? Especially under segregation, it feels pretty revolutionary for the time.
And he didn't stop with death care. He kept expanding. Started the Booker T. Washington Business College, the Citizens Federal Savings and Loan Association that became a major black-owned bank. Oh, and the A.G. Gaston Motel in Birmingham opened 54.
Right, the motel.
Yeah.
That became famous in its own right. Hosted huge stars, Stevie Wonder, Little Richard. Even Colin Powell stayed there later on. It was a place for black travelers and entertainers in Birmingham.
Although, interestingly, the review mentions the Brown Bell Bottling Company as his one big failure, so even titans stumble.
True. Good reminder. But his success rate was pretty phenomenal overall.
Now, alongside all this business building, he was also involved in civil rights, but quietly, discreetly, pushing for voting rights, equal treatment. Even back in the 1920s, he wasn't just telling customers to save money, he was telling them to register to vote, linking economic power and political power early on.
Yeah, and that kind of quiet activism didn't go unnoticed or unpunished by the white power structure. Gaston talked about being constantly plagued with traffic citations, couldn't park his cars, his hearses, his employees would get ticketed for flimsy reasons just trying to make bank deposits. It was constant low-level harassment.
But he persisted, and here's where his quiet support became, well, not so quiet sometimes. 1956, Autherine Lucy, first black student at the University of Alabama. Gaston gives her financial aid, and he drove her to campus himself. That's putting himself out there.
Definitely. And then there's the motel again. It basically became the war room for the civil rights movement in Birmingham. Shuttlesworth, King, Abernathy. They rented his best suite, apparently at reduced rates. It was a safe base of operations.
And when Bull Connor arrested King in '63, Gaston put up the bail, $160,000.
An incredible sum then. And the response? Someone bombed the motel, blew the facade right off. That shows the danger he was willing to face, even preferring the quieter path.
Yeah, his wealth and those maybe surprising connections he had with some white elites, it gave him a different kind of influence. He preferred negotiation, making deals, sometimes private threats.
Like the story about the First National Bank. The whites-only signs on the water fountains.
Exactly. They came down after Gaston threatened to pull his money out, his considerable account.
Right. And the review points out this kind of economic pressure. Black communities used it effectively long before the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Gaston was a master at it.
But this approach, this focus on economics first, sometimes clashed with other leaders, didn't it?
Oh, definitely. Like his hero, Booker T. Washington. Gaston always stressed long-term economic gains over maybe short-term civil rights battles. And that put him at odds sometimes with people like Fred Shuttlesworth or Martin Luther King Jr. They were pushing for faster change, more direct confrontation, less emphasis on quiet compromise. It represents a real fundamental tension within the movement itself. Different strategies, different philosophies.
Yeah, and sometimes events just forced his hand, right? Things like the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing or seeing Bull Connor use dogs on protesters. Those horrific moments pushed him to act more directly, perhaps faster than he ideally would have liked. It's just a fascinating dynamic, that push and pull between economic strategy and direct action.
It really is. And another layer here is the reaction within the black community itself. His immense wealth, his big house, it didn't just impress people. It sometimes caused resentment. There's a quote where he apparently lamented, around 1972, that the only thing the black people had against me was I was a success.
Yeah.
Which hints at, complex feelings about individual wealth versus collective struggle in a marginalized community.
And during the peak of the direct action 60s, he was still pushing his idea of green power, advocating for black people to build wealth through business. He felt like a voice in the wilderness sometimes on that point.
It wasn't really until the years just before he died, and he lived to be 103, passing in 1996. Only then did he start seeing maybe a renewed focus on black entrepreneurship and economic power within the community, his idea coming back around.
So wrapping this up, what does A.G. Gaston's story mean for you listening now? I think it's just a powerful reminder that history is usually way more complex, richer than the simple versions we get told.
Absolutely. His life shows there isn't just one way to contribute to change. You have quiet diplomacy, you have economic leverage, you have direct action, all playing a part. And it makes you ask, who else? What other important figures, what other kinds of activism, maybe economic or cultural, have we missed? Simply because they don't fit the standard narrative of protest marches and speeches.
Yeah. We really hope this deep dive into A.G. Gaston makes you think about those diverse paths to progress and about the sheer power of economic self-determination, especially when facing huge obstacles. His story really challenges us to think bigger about what being a titan of change actually means.